The wind howls across the beach. Gunfire cracks. Explosions tear craters into the sand. Shouts. Orders. The metallic shriek of bullets ripping past just inches away. For the men landing on the beaches of Normandy that morning, June 6, 1944, hell isn't some distant place. It's here and now. And somewhere inside a concrete bunker overlooking the shore, an MG42 roars, 1,200 rounds per minute. A continuous, piercing scream that sears itself into memory. Entire waves of soldiers are cut down before they even reach solid ground. Those who make it to cover are drenched, deafened, shaken, and filled with hatred. D-Day. For many, it's the symbol of the heroic liberation of Europe from Nazi Germany. But behind that story lies a truth that's rarely spoken about. A truth that is uncomfortable, disturbing, and deeply human. What happened to the men behind the MG42 once they were captured? The answer is dark. And it reveals a great deal about what war does to people. D-Day is often remembered as a masterpiece of military planning, precise, heroic, morally clear. But like any war, that day was chaotic, brutal, and deeply human. Official narratives focus on strategy, courage, and technological superiority. But they leave little room for the raw, immediate reactions of soldiers in combat, especially in those moments when the rules of war begin to crumble in seconds. A central factor in this breakdown was the MG42. This German machine gun wasn't just a weapon, it was a psychological force. With a rate of fire of 1,200 rounds per minute, it could tear gaps through entire assault waves in seconds. Its sound, a shrill, unbroken ripping, was described by many Allied soldiers as the most terrifying noise of the invasion. At Omaha Beach, many heard it before they saw anything else. Allied commanders knew these machine gun positions had to be neutralized for the assault to succeed. But in reality, many of them held out for hours, inflicted horrific casualties, and were only overrun under immense pressure. Picture the scene. The landing craft slams against the sandbar, the ramp drops, and instantly the first row is shredded by MG fire. There's no cover, no escape. Those who hesitate are hit. Those who run are too. Men leap into chest-deep water, burdened with over 60 pounds of gear. Some sink immediately. Others struggle forward while bullets snap into the water around them. The sand turns into a killing ground, and the few meters to cover feel like an endless nightmare. One veteran later described it this way: "It was as if the beach itself had decided not to let us leave. Fire from the front, the sea at our backs." In moments like this, a feeling emerges that's hard to describe. Not just fear, but a mixture of survival instinct, panic, and a growing hatred toward those unleashing this storm. For the men in the water and on the beach, the MG gunners aren't anonymous soldiers. They're the enemy, the source of death, the faces behind the weapon that's ripping their comrades apart. In this atmosphere, the line between combat and captivity begins to blur. Historical accounts and veteran testimonies document multiple instances where captured MG42 crews were beaten or even summarily executed by Allied soldiers, killed without trial in the heat of the moment. These acts weren't part of any official policy. They were spontaneous, emotional reactions in the chaos of the landings. One reason was fear. Fear that German soldiers were merely playing dead, waiting to fire again when Allied troops got closer. This tactic was known on both sides. In the heat of battle, soldiers sometimes shot men who were in fact trying to surrender. Another reason was revenge. Men who had spent hours pinned down under MG fire, watching friends die, often didn't react with calm reasoning when finally face to face with the gunners. At that moment, the Geneva Conventions meant nothing. What mattered was the immediate sense of threat and payback. Historians and eyewitnesses agree that the first minutes after MG positions were overrun were critical. When exhausted, traumatized attackers encountered captured defenders, beatings, mistreatment, or shootings sometimes followed, not as part of a plan, but as an emotional release after extreme stress. One American veteran recalled decades later, "I don't know if anyone gave an order, but in that moment, nobody wanted those guys to live, not after what we'd seen." Another told of an officer who tried to calm his men and failed. It was like a dam broke. No one was listening anymore. British units reported similar isolated incidents on other sections of the beach. The targets were most often identified MG crews, the men whose weapons had inflicted the heaviest casualties. Exact numbers are impossible to establish. These incidents weren't universal, but they weren't isolated anomalies either. They showed just how thin the veneer of civilization can become, even in armies fighting for a just cause. These events raise questions that still trouble historians. How do you judge actions that clearly violate the laws of war, but occur in moments of extreme life-or-death chaos? Legally, these were war crimes. In practice, they were rarely investigated after the war. Many accounts were informal, passed along orally, and the Allies had little interest in publicly prosecuting their own troops. At the same time, it's crucial to emphasize, these acts were not the norm. They were the product of extreme circumstances, hatred, exhaustion, fear, and psychological collapse. But they reveal something essential: the razor-thin line between an army fighting for justice and individuals who, in seconds, can be pushed to moral extremes. For many soldiers, the events of that day cast lifelong shadows. Some spoke about them openly, many did not. Among veterans, these stories surfaced in hints and fragments, rarely in official memoirs. Some described nightmares, flashbacks, or lasting guilt. Others rationalized their actions. Some buried the memories entirely. In post-war societies that saw themselves as liberators, there was little space for stories that complicated that image. It wasn't until decades later that historians and journalists began actively seeking these accounts, interviewing aging veterans and combing through archives. What they found wasn't a modern-day scandal. It was a deeply human, deeply unsettling part of how war actually unfolds. D-Day remains a historic turning point, militarily, politically, morally. But you can't see the full picture unless you also look at its darker sides. The brutality shown toward captured MG42 crews isn't a story meant to tear down heroism, it's a story that completes it. Because only by acknowledging the ugly, human sides of war can we truly understand its full dimension. The beaches of Normandy hold many stories. Some are heroic, some are painful, but all of them are part of the same reality.